Okay, this is our inaugural 2024 Women's Studies, Women and Gender Studies Student Conference. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank the panelists very much for presenting today. What's kind of interesting is that our conference falls on April 19th. In 1776, on April 19th, the first battle in the American Revolutionary War against tyranny and the oppression of British imperialism took place at Lexington and Concord. Today, we continue the battle against tyranny and oppression here with words, not muskets. Before beginning the conference, let's take a moment to acknowledge that it takes place on land stolen and ethnically cleansed from the Native American Muwekwa Ohlone tribe. Today, 12 CSU East-based students will present their work on gender, power, sexuality, law, and liberation. During the morning sessions, we will hear work on Audre Lorde, intersectionality, human trafficking, Mary Church Terrell, South Africa's genocide case against Israel, and intersex genital mutilation. These are all important topics and timely to discuss. Sadly, yesterday, April 18th, internationally renowned feminist scholar at Hebrew University in Israel, Nadera Shalhoub Kevorkian, who holds both Israeli and US citizenship, was arrested by Israeli police at her home in Jerusalem on the charge of incitement to violence and is being interrogated and held in jail. Information about her release is unknown. Professor Shalhoub Kevorkian has been subjected to violent repression and harassment by Hebrew University for speaking out against the ongoing genocide in Gaza that Kenia Juarez will be discussing in today's morning session. Feminist research is important in that it fearlessly addresses issues of inequality, violence, and the ways law and policy may be used to intimidate and harass weaker parties. Students will introduce themselves by name, share the title of their paper, and proceed with a 12-minute presentation. We will engage in a short Q&A exchanges at the end of each session. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to our conference today. Okay. Our first presenter is Rubi. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us the title of your paper?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rubi Hernandez, and the title of my paper is Finding the Power Within Ourselves. So I will begin, and I hope you all enjoy. Audre Lorde became a well-known poet and activist who was consistent with learning about others as well as herself and teaching the importance of that. Often we see women against each other, although we all share a common oppressive system. We can all recognize that amongst us women, there are many layers of differences from race, gender, class, and our views in life. Audre spoke about this through her writing, and what stood out to me after reading her piece named "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House" was when she talked about survival and what it meant, stating, "It is learning how to take our differences and make them our strengths." It is a form of survival because sometimes our differences provoke violence against us, and we just learn to navigate life with the existing violent ways of others. She believed in finding power within ourselves and be able to work with what we have to make that difference be a source of inspiration. Sometimes we grow up having our differences be the reason why we separate, as if these differences are always a bad thing. But I like the way she brought up this perspective of learning to figure out ways to fight back the oppressive system and learn to see the greatness within ourselves as well as others, so that it doesn't succeed in working against us. We all have different identities and many of our characteristics and preferences might be criticized or looked down upon in the public eye. This criticism and notion of normal has truly affected many people in a serious way. It has caused low self-esteem, loneliness, feeling like we don't belong, or that we can't feel free to be ourselves. And even worse, it has led some to take their lives. Making these differences our strengths, as Lorde describes, is such a beautiful way to view it. We are all different, and I think that's part of the beauty in humanity because we get to learn from each other. But sometimes it may be difficult to stay positive and look at what makes us different as our strength due to the power that society can have on us. There are several examples that I can think of where this logic can apply. One example is Lorde herself. Identifying as a Black lesbian feminist includes probably the most attacked identities. Historically in the United States, Black women have been undervalued, overworked, and mistreated. Feminists have been heavily criticized, and lesbians have received so much violence due to homophobia. This is the reason why I admire her way of thinking. Despite the multiple ways in which she received hate, she still figured out ways to survive, which made her that much more experienced and wise. Her experiences taught her what should not be done to others because she knew the pain it can cause. Not only did she learn these life experiences, but she fought for those like her who were struggling as well and shared ways in which we can see ourselves in a different light. The second example is a bit different than what she was referring to, but it made me think of today's common learning disabilities with children such as ADHD and autism. My 2-year-old has a provisional diagnosis of autism, and I must admit it took me a while to accept it and a little longer to embrace it. After I was informed of the results, I would notice how some people sat in their face expressions when I shared the news. This hurt me because it made it seem like it was something bad. But comparisons with children also hurt me, such as this kid already says this, or this kid already does that, and they're the same age. Sometimes these comments are not made with malicious intentions, but simply by making these comparisons made me feel down. When I learned to embrace it, I thought about my son, who thankfully is healthy, eats well, and is such a playful and happy kid who brings all of us so much joy. He is constantly learning and is able to offer the world something beautiful just like anyone else. Learning about a diagnosis as such can of course bring concerns, but we can also look at the strengths and make those strengths our main focus because this is who they are. The third example is the relationship amongst women. Lorde also stated, as women, we have been taught either to ignore our differences or view them as causes for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. Her statement highlights so much truth because, as she mentioned, these differences typically have negative outcomes. Amongst women, we gossip, criticize, belittle, and/or envy one another. The opposite is also a possibility, so why is it the way it is? When I imagine women coming together with a common positive intention, I think of amazing power being possible. There is power in what we speak, and the idea of having women come together to encourage, nurture, support, uplift, and view each other as a reflection of ourselves comes down to what we see within ourselves. The examples I provided are just some of the ways that I interpreted her quotes. Another thing that it made me think about was how over time we have redefined words. Some words that were insulting have been owned and redefined to mean something positive, and people have quickly adapted to it. I think Lorde was doing something similar when using her own differences in her identity that were criticized or looked down upon. It takes courage to truly accept ourselves, love all of who we are, flaws and all, and represent it proudly to the world. Lorde learned to own it and accept who she was and revolutionize her identity into something that empowered her and as a result empowers others to do the same. Thank you.
Tyra?
Yes, that's me. Hi, everybody. My name is Tyra Simpson. I'm excited to be here today to add to the dialogue about what it means to be a feminist scholar and to expand on the perspective of Audre Lorde. The title of my paper is Intersectionality. So feminism is casually understood as a belief in equality of the sexes, right? It's simply illustrated by advocacy for the social, political, and economic success of women. But while feminism is widely credited as this productive movement towards inclusivity, it also exists as a direct result of patriarchal structures that are rooted in white supremacy. As we just heard, Audre Lorde is one of many women who considers feminism within this cultural spectrum and calls attention to every experience that exists around and within these parallel ideals. Lorde is not only an imaginative and talented poet and author, but also a passionate and intuitive activist. In her work, Lorde calls to arms a reform of feminism and provides insight to how this movement can make the most positive impact on society by expanding advocacy to include more collective experiences. In her work, Lorde responds to this idea that feminism only requires a focus on sex and gender by explaining intersectionality and why it's relevant to the feminist movement. She also expands on the concept of diversity by explaining why interdependence or reliance must exist where tolerance is commonly placed in the feminist movement. Additionally, Lorde unravels the very structure of the feminist movement to expose its patriarchal roots in order to express the importance of interdependence and intersectionality. These approaches signify the potential of the feminist movement with the restructuring of what we understand as inclusive and how that inclusivity is achieved for all women. Intersectionality is described by Kimberly Crenshaw as a lens that helps us consider the multiple levels of injustice that occur when identities and experiences of individuals overlap. Crenshaw is a prominent leader of spreading awareness about intersectionality, but as she shares, she's not the first or the only person to experience its effects. Audre Lorde speaks to this experience as well in her work titled "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." Lorde explains her own personal experience with intersectionality as a Black lesbian woman who was asked last minute to speak in the only panel to include the perspective of a Black or lesbian feminist at a conference about feminism. She shares how racism, sexism, and homophobia interlap when it's assumed that, quote, lesbian and Black women have nothing to say about the impacts of patriarchy and aren't openly sought out to provide their perspectives. Additionally, Lorde presents the intersectional experiences of women who have not only had to overcome sexual harm within marriage, but within the world as well through experiences of prostitution, for instance. Further, she explains the experiences of women who cannot even take the time to speak on their own oppression because they must show up in support of women who are privileged to be able to do so for themselves. Lorde states that our personal visions help lay the groundwork for political action to highlight how important intersectional perspectives are for movements such as the feminist movement. Without interdependence of intersecting experiences, feminism only exists as a flip side of patriarchy. Lorde explains the concept of interdependence as being a critical reshaping of tolerance. Through her discussion of intersectionality, she presents that differences innately exist within the lives of individuals and communities in our society. And tolerance merely allows for passive change, while interdependence allows for active and creative reform. Interdependence is an acknowledgement and utilization of differences when seeking positive social change, as Lorde illustrates, and it allows for power to be forged in monumental movements such as the feminist movement. Lorde states that without community, there's no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. She discusses the reality of feminism being driven by the intentional education and self-awareness of white women, and addresses the fact that they have the ability and the choice to invest that same energy and that same effort in becoming educated and aware of experiences of those who differ from them in identity or experience. This is not only a call to action regarding reform of the feminist movement, but also an illustration of the impact when intersectionality is not considered. In order for society to truly be more inclusive and equitable, individuals within movements such as the feminist movement must consider where their purpose is rooted and dismantle the oppressive sources that they exist in spite of by utilizing opposing perspectives. Lorde expands on the core purpose of feminism as addressing the destruction caused by patriarchy. She explains that while feminism seeks to break down oppressive patriarchal roots, this movement cannot use the same practices that are used in patriarchal systems to do so. The very title, "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House," is quoted to express that when women fear difference and resist interdependence, they may overcome symptoms of patriarchy, but they cannot, quote, bring about genuine change. Lorde shares that it's important to understand that the terror that feminists may feel towards the differences of others within their movement may be displacing their own indoctrination to patriarchal ideals. This is still patriarchy and white supremacy in action. As Lorde describes, divide and conquer must become define and empower if truly trying to uproot oppression. Simply put, fire cannot be put out with fire. Feminists can utilize interdependence to call upon diverse strengths within individuals and work together to overcome the debilitation of oppression and to cultivate collective empowerment. In such a brief context, Audre Lorde's able to unravel and respond to a multitude of experiences and structures that can either help or hinder equity and inclusion. As with any social movement, change is not possible without first understanding the need for change. Feminism strives for equality. It models empowerment of difference. It requires empathy. This cannot be achieved without the consideration of intersectionality and the interdependence of all women within the movement. Lorde explains how interrelated experiences of oppression can be utilized to generate strength within the feminist movement and help women work towards the same goals in more efficient ways. She shares how the inability to work together as diverse individuals can stimulate the same issues that already exist. Lorde's perspective is not simply a lecture on statistical research, it's an intuitive response to the personal experience of marginalized individuals everywhere. Even in his own reflection of the civil rights movement, for instance, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people." So, if we want to create positive social change, we must start at the individual level and approach our relationships with empathy and compassion. From there, we can collectively work together to dismantle harmful systems that exist on any scale. Thank you.
Shawna?
Yes. Hello, my name is Shawna Jones, and the title of mine is Prostitution and Law. In chapter 13, 20, and 29 of Catherine A. McKinnon's book, Women's Lives, Men's Laws, she argues that prostitution should be legal and protected by law. Chapter 13, Prostitution and the Civil Rights. McKinnon describes the lives of prostitutes as being an abyss, which is a never-ending, bottomless, dark life of unimaginable disregard for women's basic human rights, the same as slaves. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude for African Americans. If women don't give consent and is forced to participate in prostitution, then she is a slave and should be protected by the 13th Amendment. A woman is treated like a slave and repeatedly raped, subjected to cruel and brutal treatment that has no limits. McKinnon argues, if a prostitute does try to set boundaries on what one can do to them, who enforces that limit? A pimp? She states, nothing realistically limits a pimp, and ultimately anything can be done to their property for a price. Should the 13th Amendment be applied to prostitution, the same as forced labor and exploitative servitude? How would the legal system show physical or legal force that is required to prove a person's 13th Amendment rights have been violated? McKinnon asked the question, should prostitution be included as an additional invalidation of forced labor? Is the protections around prostitution an issue because it involves women's rights, liberalism, and feminism? Chapter 20, Liberalism and the Death of Feminism. McKinnon talks about a group of fearless women that took over an underground newspaper in 1970 entitled Rap. This paper became a movement for women that gave women a place to have their beliefs and experiences in the porn industry heard and taken seriously. This platform supported women's views about their voice being degenerated and reputed. Another movement McKinnon talks about criticize acts like rape as male violence against women as a form of sexual terrorism. This movement harbored deeply misogynistic attitudes toward married women and the family foundation. McKinnon points out that rape was viewed as just sex. Pimps and Johns, and the point of view that women were all born to sell sex. According to this movement, batterers carried the notion that forced sex was an expression of love. Feminism was under attack and dying at the hands of the criticized sexual silencing of non-liberal attitudes. In chapter 29, The Roar on the Side of Silence, McKinnon reveals for the first time in history, women speaking out in public about being violated, raped, and sold in private based on their sex. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Anti-Pornography Civil Rights Ordinance on December 12th and 13th in 1983, voices of the violated, degenerated, terrorized, and intimidated were finally unmuted and being heard. What was done in the dark was finally coming to light through publicized court hearings. This forum discussed how pornography works in the real world. McKinnon argues that victims at these hearings gave a face to the legal and legitimized stories and secrets. These investigations provided a place for victims to speak their truth and be legally heard and seen. According to McKinnon, giving back dignity and hope for healing for pornography survivors came through the act of introducing the Anti-Pornography Civil Rights Law. The ordinances that resulted from the hearings granted civil access to court to prove the abuse and the role of the pornography in each such situation. The hearings shed light on the neglect, gay abuse, child pornography, violent sex, pornographic cartoons, revenge porn, and using intimidation to force the sufferer into porn or using a person in pornographic material without consent, and a myriad of other violations of the victim. The hearing took place in public and on record. Some parts of the ordinances became law after the release of the commission's report. The societal idea of pornography had been changed by revealing the harm and a wide range of issues each participant suffered. The visual and verbal implications forced a reconsideration of how people are treated and regarded in the pornographic sex industry. McKinnon ended this chapter by expressing that there is finally a resistance to pornography, and how people normalize and condone the harm that comes with the pornography industry. The acceptable sexual level of force climbs higher and higher. Women's real status drops lower and lower. Catherine M.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open the floor to questions. Does anyone have does a question come to mind that you'd like to ask the panelists?
First starting with Tyra. I'm wondering what inspired you to write your paper? The importance of your
Yes, thank you. So I would just say, like, lately I've been really inspired by just my experience of being Black and growing up as mixed. I didn't have a lot of access, I would say, I was raised by a white mom and didn't have a lot of access to my Black side of my family. And after going to college and really immersing myself with a lot of diversity more than I've experienced in my life. I got really curious about myself and of course, just growing in self-awareness and being out in the world as a Black woman, now understanding why I felt certain ways, certain perspectives that I carried of the world in my relationships as a Black woman. It's a lot more heavy now, and I'm a lot more curious these days. And especially I live in a predominantly white city, as you know, and I've been just a lot more curious about what it means for me to be a Black woman. And Audre Lorde just really inspired me. This was an assignment, but I feel like I just got really inspired by it and was able to pour my personal inspiration into my reflection. So yeah, that's really where it comes from.
What's Jones? I'm doing great. Reflection of the 13th Amendment, what does that mean to you?
So it was very interesting applying that concept to pornography because it is the amendment that was put in place to end slavery. And I don't feel a lot of people view the pornography industry as slavery. So to have that connection be made through the 13th Amendment and through pornography was very interesting to me. So it definitely opened my eyes to what, a real person in the real world may be experiencing and what protections are or not, either are or are not in place to help someone that, is experiencing that type of control. Same type of control that was, abolished in the 13th Amendment for slavery is the same type of control some people want to get away from when it comes to the pornography industry. So I thought that was an awesome, deeper thought for me to have as far as the 13th Amendment and pornography.
So, in Rubi, what is something that what is something that constantly questions that you all that arise when you engaging in the subject of the like something that makes you so passionate about doing the subject?
Something that like really stood out to me was just like I mentioned in the paper, like how she decided to view those things that she was criticized for as something positive. To me, that was inspiring for myself, just to see life in a different way. And we might come across different things that might be like a hurdle in our lives, but we come across it. It depends how we come across it. Like if we decide to see it as something that's gonna take us down, or is it something that's gonna inspire us, and despite that, we're gonna move forward. And so I really like that part of her work.
Other questions from the audience? I have a question for Ruby. It's interesting that her name is Audre Lorde, and you were talking about your child, and we think of children being all Lorde's children, and that we don't always treat each other with we treat each other with judgment. I think a lot of your paper was talking about how women judge each other and how parents, mothers judge each other. How can we get to a point where we kind of lessen the judgment that's going on, do you think?
That's a really good question. How do we stop judging? I did mention in my paper that the way we can interact has a lot to do with how we view ourselves. So I think that's a big part of it. If you view yourself with judgment, it's kind of like a given that you're likely to criticize others in the same way. And I feel like, you even mentioned that too, like we need to take a look at ourselves in an individual way first before we can make any change. So I do think that doing self-work and being able to learn about ourselves and being kind to ourselves is the way to go, so that we can in the future look at others in a kind way too.
Thank you. Tyra, I was thinking, I was very impressed with your paper and your focus on Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality and the multiple levels of injustice.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how the personal experience, in your view, can spark political action.
Personal
The
experience.
personal unique layers of difference that we all inhabit. How does that spark behaving, engaging in a political way?
Yeah, so at least speaking from my own experience with intersectionality, it allows me to practice more empathy, really, when I take it into consideration and I approach my relationships with that same perspective that I carry of myself, that in a one room I could be experiencing multiple different lenses and experiences all in one setting. And so I just think that understanding that and grasping that allows me to approach my relationships with more understanding that other people are having the same experience, that multiple situations could be impacting them. And just like I kind of stated in the paper too, we can all kind of play to that together, play to our strengths and utilize a multitude of perspectives. I feel like it allows us to strengthen ourselves and to strengthen the way in which we work together and create differences.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that focusing on one or two differences doesn't begin
Right.
to look at how all the different ways we're
Exactly.
similar.
Yeah, exactly.
And why is diversity of viewpoints so important? Why is it important that we hear from many, many voices in society?
It's because many different lives are impacted by it. And we can overlook the experiences of other people when we just focus on a one-way street, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shawna brought up Catherine McKinnon. Catherine McKinnon is famous for inventing the term sexual harassment in the 1970s. It didn't exist until women's perspective was in the workplace, and that term took a long time to evolve and get put into law. But it took women, for that to happen. I was wondering, Shawna, and anyone can comment on this. There's so much coercion when it comes to prostitution. There's so much coercion. And why is prostitution, human trafficking, pornography, why is it such a huge industry today? What kind of forces do you think allow that to happen to women, to children, girls, boys, to many men as well? Worldwide, and what are mechanisms you think, if many voices are heard, if they have an impact on creating public policy, how can we change that?
So I would say maybe one of the bigger core reasons is, we do come from a patriarchal society. And so that comes with the view mainly from a male's perspective. And so historically, we understand that a man's perspective of a woman can be deemed less than, and as we know in society, a woman's, is deemed as less than in pay, less than in, regard, less than in positions, certain, positions politically. So maybe that's a, core reason why it's such a big, push for the sexual nature of women. And then that, for a male's, in a sense, sexual appetite. It's always been at kind of the forefront historically with slaves. That was a big part of slavery when it came to women. And then as far as speaking toward the change, I think we all three said it starts with ourselves. It starts with these types of forums. It starts with studying, having a deeper understanding and education, using a different lens, being able to represent yourself in a more, in a way that have more knowledge. And when you have the opportunity, whatever that opportunity may be, if it's a work opportunity, if it's being a mom, as myself, I was a preschool teacher for 23 years. That was my opportunity to give a different perspective to children, to families, to just help others understand that there are so many different layers, as we've said, to a person and to people and to the whys. They're choosing, in some senses, they may not have had control over why they chose this particular walk in life. But when you do have control, having someone there to guide you can be a big, reason for change.
Do you think if the Senate was filled with 50 out of the 100 people who looked like people on this panel, we would live in a different world?
Heck, yeah.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was gonna be my point. I think it first started with voting. You have to vote culturally, whoever we feel represent us as a population until office. So that's culturally and also racially. So if we have more women and more people of culture in those areas of law and politics and on the Supreme Court, and if the stereotype of women are too emotional to run the world, once that narrative change the masses, that women can also lead strategically to change politics. It starts from higher up. Even if you gather and protest, even if you're recording anything, it still goes to lawmakers. It goes back to, even if you record something, it's still somebody's perspective of how they felt and if something was constitutional. So I think laws need to be changed. It needs to be amended, thrown out, and just start over.
Because they're doing such a great job now, right?
Thanks.
Well, I'll just speak really quickly. One of my models for being a preschool teacher was teach the children, so we don't have to teach the adults. So, it really starts at a really young age. There is a developmental age where the child is pretty much set in their beliefs. And it
Stands for parents.
yes, but it usually kind of stops at 5 years old, believe it or not. So it's like you have from birth to 5 to pour into that baby as much diversity, love, support, politics, believe it or not. Those are the opportunities that I felt were more meaningful to the later adult to help cultivate this culture we're asking for change from. Because like you said, it's like they're doing a great job. So it's in the sense of the politics we're in this moment, we definitely have to throw it out and start over, but start over with the babies because they're our future.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'd like to have everyone give a. And here's our. This is for Rubi.
Thank you. You guys did it all.
Excellent. I know. I did that. We have coffee and some bagels. Our next session will begin at 11, so we have some time. Okay, so this is our second and final morning session, and we have Felecia Hubbard, Kenia, I'm gonna pronounce it correctly. Kenia Juarez, and Orlando Rocha. Okay, fantastic. And so if you introduce yourselves and then your paper title, Felecia, if you go first, we can begin. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felecia Hubbard, and my person I am discussing is Mary Ellis Church Terrell. Mary Ellis Church Terrell was born in Memphis, Tennessee on September 23rd, 1863, and died on July 24th, 1954. She died at 86 years old. She was the first president of the National Association of Colors, from 1886 to 1901. She was a newspaper journalist, a teacher, a community leader, a civil rights activist, and women's activist. She participated in the African American Women's Club movement during the Progressive era. Her grandparents were mixed descent. Her grandfather was a European American who owned a steamship, and he was an operator, steamship operator in Virginia. Mary's father, Robert Church, worked on his father's steamship as a watchman, and he saved all his income. He saved and invested in depopulation of Memphis after the yellow fever epidemic in 1878. This made him the first African-American Southerner to be a millionaire. Mary's mother was the first hairstylist and business owner in Memphis to style influential residents. Mary's parents' wealth had a cultural influence that allowed her to socialize and network with influential African Americans like Booker T. Washington, the director of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and her father also introduced her to Frederick Douglass at the President's Jane Garfield Inauguration Gala in 1881. This is where she collaborated with Frederick Douglass on several civil rights campaigns in the year of 1893. Mary's parents' educational beliefs enabled her to go to Antioch College Laboratory Model School in Ohio from 1871 to 1874. By the time she was 8, the Memphis School District failed her. Therefore, in 1885, she attended Oberlin Public School, and she graduated in 1879. She continued her education at Oberlin College. She was the first African-American woman to attend this college. She earned a BA in Classics in 1884 and a master's degree in education in 1888. However, she didn't participate in the 2-year women course. She decided to enroll in the 4-year white gentleman course. Her skin complexion and gender drew attention to her and confusion to her white counterparts. As a freshman at Oberlin College, she was nominated as a class poet, and she was elected to 2 of the college literary society groups. She also served on the newspaper as the editor of the Oberlin Review. This allowed her to partake in the civil rights discrimination of middle-class and upper-class Blacks. In 1885, she taught modern language at Wilberforce University, a historical Black college founded by the Methodist Church in Ohio for 2 years. After that, she moved to Washington, D.C. In 1887, she taught Latin at M Street Colored High School. This was the first African-American public high school. In 1895, she was appointed the superintendent of the District of Columbia Board of Education. She held this position from 1895 to 1906. She was the first African-American in the US to have such position. She traveled. In 1888, she took a sabbatical from teaching to travel the world in Europe for 2 years. She became fluent in French, German, Italian during this time. In 1881, Oberlin College presented her with a mission officer position. However, she rejected it. But if she would have accepted it, she would have been the first African-American to obtain this position. In 1881, she married Robert Herbert Terrell. He was a teacher and a well-known African-American activist also. He fought for racial equality and women enfranchisement in the late 19th and 20th century. Consequently, she was forced to resign because her husband taught there also. After returning from traveling, she changed her focus of teaching to social activism in 1892. After her closest friend, Thomas Moss, was lynched in Memphis by whites because his business was a competitor of theirs. Therefore, she published Lynching from a Negro's Point of View in 1904. She strived to deconstruct the screw negatives of Black men who were being targeted by lynching. In 1892, she was elected the first woman president of the Washington, D.C. Black Debate Organization and Bethel Literacy Land Historical Society. In 1886, she joined other famous African-American women like Ida B. DeVoe, Ida B. Wells Burnett to fight in the anti-lynching crusades, and she became the president from 1896 to 1901, the president of the National Association of Colored Women. She campaigned vigorously with other Black and white organizations and wrote and spoke intensely about women's suffrage. The National Association of Color mission statement encouraged African Americans, especially women, to unify racially to gain equal opportunity, freedom, and advance as a whole race. This organization strived to advance social mobility, employment, education, and to participate in community activism. Mary believed that all Blacks will one day help end racial discrimination. Her slogan, "Lifting Blacks as they climb up," became the slogan of the National Association of Women of Color. The Colored Women League established training and kindergarten programs before they was included in today's Washington, D.C. public school district. On February 18, 1899, she delivered a speech titled "The Progress of Colored Women" at the National American Suffrage Association session in Washington. The speech encouraged other organizations to come in and join the fight on women hardships. Her speech was readily accepted by the association and African-American news outlets, ultimately directing Mary to be invited back as an uncertified African-American ambassador of the association. Mary went on to give several national speeches that included in the Union, "There is Strength," which debated the necessary for uniting all African-American people. She also conducted another speech, "What It Means to Be Colored in the Capital of the U.S." This portrayed and conveyed the obstacles that she faced as being an African-American woman in DC. In 1904, she was invited to speak at the International Congress of Women held in Berlin, Germany. She was the only Black woman at the conference who received a standing ovation when she delivered her address in German, French, and then in English. In 1908, she spoke also at the Senegal Falls Historical Society, and they celebrated her work of women activism. She fought alongside other races and genders on paramount issues. In 1909, Mary and other fellow journalists like Ida B. Wells were the only two African Americans that were assigned to call and attend the first organization meeting of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. She became the founder, and from 1913 to 1914, she helped organize and write the oath and became an honorary Delta Sigma Theta sorority member. In 1910, she became the co-founder of the College Alumni Club, later named the National Association of Women University. In 1917, she protested and picketed the Wilson White House with National Women Party members. Regarding women's oppression, she fought for their civil rights because she acknowledged she belonged to the only racial group in the country that was compared to European American women. Voting. African-American women won the right to vote in Southern states from 1890 to 1908 during the first election. So she said this was a double burden of their sex, race, and not being able to demonstrate their equal rights. Therefore, in 1920, she became actively involved in the Republican Party, where she was appointed the Director of Works by the African-American women of the Republican Party. Of the Republican National Committee, which worked for Warren G. Harding. Following the passage of the 19th Amendment, Mary concentrated on the universal civil rights of people. In 1940, she published her autobiography about her, A Colored Woman in a White World, which described her encounter with discrimination. In 1848, she became the first Black African-American woman Association of University, where she fought against discrimination against, let me repeat that. In 1948, Terrell became the first African-American Association of University Women, tongue tied. She won a lawsuit in 1950 because she was excluded from her association that she founded. She regained her membership, becoming the first Black member after the exclusion of people of color within the DC chapter. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry about that. At the age of 86, she disputed segregation in public places by protesting the John R. Thompson restaurant in Washington, D.C. In 1953, she won a Supreme Court rule that segregating eating facilities were unconstitutional. This was a crucial, groundbreaking moment in civil rights history. Lastly, she died at 86. Her legacy and early fight for Black women to vote continues to be cited today. As the war was winding down, Terrell and her daughter Phyllis joined Alice Paul and Lucy Burns of the National Women Party to picket the White House for women's suffrage. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Okay. We have now Kenia Juarez.
Good morning, everybody.
Make sure you speak up.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, good morning. For this presentation, I chose to talk about the South African genocide case against Israel. I know it's a very sensitive topic, but I found this topic to be very educational and a good way to spread awareness of what is currently still affecting our country and others as well. And it's not only affecting the people living this genocide, but also the people watching it, since it's so broadcasted very lively. So to start off, a little bit of a backstory on what a genocide actually is a deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying the nation or that group. Examples is killing or causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of living life. So just messing up their living status, imposing measure intended to prevent births within the group, and forcefully transferring children of the group to another. The Israeli government has repeatedly stated that its intentions is to destroy Hamas, not the Palestinian civilians. The IDF also states that this all started on October 7th when Hamas warned and pushed through the borders and unfortunately killed 120 Israeli and also took some hostages. The IDF knew about this attack a year before it was supposed to happen, so they were aware and they were warned. The Israeli government didn't take it as a serious threat. Since then, Hamas has not attacked or taken any more hostages. Hamas released 105 captives, as well as the Israeli government released some of the hostages that they also had. Hamas has not made an attack on Israel. It's only been the IDF government towards all of Gaza City. Since then, the Israeli government has forced the Palestinian people to move and get trapped in Rafah, which they are right now. There are currently 1 million displaced Palestinians, civilians, which are all women, kids, infants, and men. Some of the attacks that the IDF have done that would be considered genocide is airdropping flyers warning of intimidation attacks. So they would warn them and then right after that would attack them. Calling civilians' phones to urge them to leave targeted buildings. There's video proof, there's documentation that their government has gone on phone calls and specifically told the press specifically that they're going to be targeting certain buildings while they're doing it. Or boarding some strikes when civilians are in the way. A lot of these attacks were done with civilians in the area mainly, so not necessarily targeted towards Hamas. striking houses, schools, hospitals, churches, and even places where the injured are trying to recover. The reason as to why I feel like this took a turn for me, obviously it's a tragedy that is still happening, but in recent articles, there was a couple of Palestinian women that came out saying that while they were detained, they reported being sexually assaulted, while other women were also threatened and committed sexual violence towards them. There was also a couple of photos of Palestinian women held hostage in very degrading circumstances. And all of this was uploaded on social media by the Israeli government or somebody in their military in their like social media accounts, as well as photos of Israeli army posing with intimate clothes found in the houses of Palestinian women and objectifying their clothes. This is something important that I wanted to mention because as a woman, it breaks my heart that not only are they being displaced by the military, but they're also being objectified on top of everything. It's not only getting the Palestinian people out of Gaza, but now it's adding more trauma, ongoing trauma to them, and as well as trauma to everybody watching this. All of this is being documented on social media, like I said, and being so accessible for us to see, creating trauma of feeling hopeless and not being able to help them, no matter how many protests, how many walkouts, how many boycotts we do. The U.S. government continues to support the Israeli government. Now that we know a little bit more about the backstory as to what is happening in Gaza, South Africa and a couple more countries are speaking out about the genocide that is still happening. South Africa was building a case against the Israeli government and taking more of a legal aspect of this. They put all of this crimes on paper, and it was about like an 84-page application that they submitted on December 29th of last year, which basically stated all the bombing, all the misplace of the people living there. Since then, South Africa has received support from at least 10 countries publicly. Examples: Pakistan, Venezuela, Colombia, Turkey. But unfortunately, as of right now, the court has not taken decision on whether or not it's considered genocide, nor has the court decided whether there would be a jurisdiction to hear the case. South Africa has requested the court to order a permanent ceasefire for the people in Gaza. The court did not follow and did not go through the ceasefire. Israeli government continues to hold people hostage and continues to bomb. The U.S. government still stands with the Israeli government and continues to commit not doing it, but still helping them accomplish this genocide. But yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Ken. Okay, and for our final presentation for our second morning session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Orlando. I'm majoring in anthropology, minoring in women and gender studies. Just want to say thank you to Dr. Comerford and the department for inviting me today to, discuss with you all. So during the summer last year, I picked up a book to pass the time, and it's called Born Both. I recommend it to all of you guys. I picked it up at the library. It definitely opened my eyes to the intersex community, and which I'm gonna be talking about today. So all right, so yeah. In my social justice analytics paper, I plan to examine how newborn babies that are born intersex are exploited by going under the scalpel against their own will and choice. Another intersectionality trait besides age that will be discussed is how intersex genital mutilation, IGM, is predominantly given to little girls. This report will be focused around the thesis that this operation that is given to these newborns to reassign their genitals is a social justice issue that should be questioned, challenged, and ultimately banned on a global scale. I will provide evidence by citing 5 sources that will help to strengthen this argument. 3 class readings are a PEA style masterclass and Valentine and Wilchins. The outside source will be supported by Cranial and this book. So it is imperative for this conversation to offer context on human biology. According to the documentary Life Before Birth in the Womb, the fetus goes through quite the experience in its early stages of development. Everyone, including men, start off with female organs. To become a boy, androgen hormones take place for the baby to undergo masculine characteristics such as producing a penis. The testicles of men are proportional to the ovaries that are found in women. This is the same reason why men have nipples as well. In the case of those born with atypical genitalia, a fusion occurs where both sexual reproductive organs appear simultaneously. These individuals are referred to as being intersex. In this book by Haida Valoria, the author states that being intersex is defined as someone who is born with reproductive organs, chromosomes, and/or external genitalia that are different enough to make them vulnerable or subject to stigmatization, discrimination, and/or medical intervention. The term hermaphrodite is an outdated derogatory slur that slanders this demographic while doing them no justice. It should be noted that being intersex differs from that of the transgender and cross-dressing community. These individuals are born with this condition in contrast to going to the store to buy a dress or a suit to wear. Intersectionality is a shared experience that we all encounter in our everyday lives. This includes one's gender, sex, ethnicity, class, race, geographical location, religion, age, along other examples. These identities are also consist of experiences or of privileged contexts that intersect with those of oppression. By conducting an intersectional analysis on intersex genital mutilation, the results indicate that age is a factor to this ongoing social injustice issue. Intersex genital mutilation, IGM, is a practice of surgically assigning intersex infants a particular gender status. The discussion to go through with this procedure is made difficult. No, it's made for the infant by the parents without their given consent. It is understandable how the parents want what is best for the child, but this is not the best. This is not the way to go about handling this grave situation. Children in our society face discrimination in the form of their age. This is problematic as the infant's age conflicts with those that with the choice to be operated on. The rights of a child to their own body is overlooked and not given any consideration. There are various forms of trauma that can arise, such as leaving the infant with psychological scars, physical pain, and often a loss of erotic function as an adult. The intersex community should have access to the operation once they are of legal age. Having the opportunity to discuss with the doctors about which option is best suitable for them, and perhaps most importantly, being able to consent to the operation are only made possible upon reaching adulthood. The age of an individual is not the only hurdle that these people have to learn to overcome. Intersex people are faced with the challenges of having to battle heteronormativity in mainstream society. Under this belief, the genitals that you are born with determine your gender identity. People are expected to abide by and perform under these gender expectations commencing from birth. Heteronormativity conflicts with the intersex community, for it thrives upon the notion that there is only male or female. This marginalized group, however, makes up approximately 1.7 or 5.6 million of the population in this country. An example of how heteronormativity oppresses these people can be noted when their parents perform medically unnecessary surgery on their baby's genitalia to ensure that they are unambiguously male or female. This is problematic, for it reinforces the notion that there is a binary, leaving no room or tolerance for this minority. The demands set forward by heteronormativity make it challenging for this community to be socially accepted. Under this narrative, these newborns are faced with the pressures governed by society to be either male or female. This non-inclusive and conservative way of thinking forces parents to take drastic measures by surgically reassigning their newborns' genitalia to create a penis or a vagina. The shame these parents have overrides their ability to embrace their child just how they were intended to be. The heteronormative pressure society engraves on all of us to be like that of a man or woman proves to be too much for some. Changing the narrative and our perceptions of gender and sexuality is one solution to combat these surgeries under this ideology. Our shared human experience, along with our unique differences, should be celebrated. Confronting heteronormativity with acceptance for people born with this condition will make our society grow. Parents should not feel ashamed for having an intersex child. The problem does not have to do with the baby, but more with society and this narrow way of thinking. It is unfortunate how this is the case. The outside source is the article Child Surgery for Ambiguous Genitalia, Glimpses of Practice Changes or More of the Same by Sarah Crane, Lina Machalet, Ayman Mushtaq, and Michael Urban. Within the sketchy world of IGM surgeries rests the issue of feminizing surgery. The focus is on girls and women as they are most likely to be recipients of infant surgery. In the cases of females that are not born with a vaginal opening, an operation can help to create one. The author goes on to state that parents may be required to insert a mold of graduating size to maintain or increase vaginal size for their daughter. This extreme approach that science and medicine make in the name of conformity is wrong because it dehumanizes these victims. An intersectional analysis of IGM suggests that the female sex in particular is more likely to be subjugated to this surgery. A woman may experience impaired genital sensitivity and compromised sexual function following feminizing surgery and clitoral surgery. These operations target the very essence of womanhood by alternating and mutilating their most private areas. The definition of femininity that society has is ever evolving, allowing intersex individuals with more dominant female reproductive organs into the same spaces as other women will allow for these people to become more socially accepted. There is diversity in what it means to be human. The complications that arise are not limited to genital sensitivity and a compromised sexual function upon reaching adulthood. The victims are often left with receiving permanent life-changing alterations to their bodies. I'm quoting a book right here. It says, one person doesn't have anything where a clitoris or a penis should be. There's nothing but skin. It's like looking at a Barbie doll's crotch, but it's human. Testimonies of actual victims bring awareness to how detrimental genital surgeries given as an infant can be later on in life. It is counterproductive to rely on these unethical operations because these people will experience a lifetime of therapy and visits to the doctor. The shame goes to the doctors that go home at night and rest their head on their pillow after playing Frankenstein on a newborn earlier in the day. It is disgraceful for medical professionals to even mention to their clients the genital mutilation surgery as a solution for their child's condition. The name of science has gone corrupt for continuing to allow this to dwell within our local hospitals and society at large. Issues regarding the surgery can be addressed by allowing the children to explore the solution that is best for them alongside their parents and the doctors once they are older. Their voices matter most in this situation. Newborns that are born both will face a plethora of challenges throughout their entire lifetime. Hardships commence from birth when frantic decisions to undergo the surgery are made for them by their parents. Heteronormativity would dictate that they had to fit into the binary of being a male or female. Little girls that receive feminizing surgery for having an enlarged clitoris or an absence of a vaginal opening. The psychological and physiological pain that these victims underwent the operation as an infant will linger on into adulthood. All of these examples prove that IGM is a social injustice issue. It is imperative that society addresses and critically analyzes the mutilation of these children so that newborns born in the future generations do not have to experience a life such as this. This malpractice fails to offer a solution to the underlying problem. It is essential that parents, obstetricians, and other medical professionals gain adequate knowledge on what IGM is and what this distasteful operation means for the child. Having open discussions and safe spaces with parents on gender, the intersex experience, and perhaps most importantly, the repercussions that come along with mutilating their child's genitals are necessary to ban this surgery. A world where these newborns will never get to feel the scalpel while lying down on their operating table will be one worth living in. Giving these people the opportunity to live their true and authentic lives without any prejudice dictated by the likes of heteronormativity and the negative implications that come along with the surgery should be the top priority of our society.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience that come to mind? That you'd like to ask any of the speakers? Yes.
Well, I mean, my mom, so I know, but I was gonna say, what made you guys pick your topics?
Great question.
For me, I wanted something that was going to make me want to write 5 or 6 pages. I was like, what would, what would touch me? And then once I looked up Black feminists and I realized my person was like the first to do a lot. I was reading, she was the first effort, she was a first. And I was like, oh, she's a bad mama jamma, she started the National Woman of Color, and more that I read about her, I was like, being the first, it sets the precedence. And the more I wrote, and I was like, she was the first of everything. I was proud to do this paper. And then when I was selected, I was like, oh, it was first an assignment. You got to do the assignment. And then when the professor told me, would I be interested? I was nervous at first, but I wanted to do something that was dear to my heart if I was going to talk about it.
Other,
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what made you pick the topic?
Yeah, I just find that this is something that I'm passionate for. This is if given the chance, if attending grad school, this is something that I would like to challenge, go up against. I think it's wrong that science, and doctors go about the, handling the situation the way they do. I didn't talk about it too much, but they're, I don't want to give out spoilers, but this person in the book, they were in a committee or in a group, right? And they met someone that had the surgery when they were younger, and that person, I believe that they had the parents wanted a boy, so they had a boy surgery, and once they grew up, that person ended up having female puberty, and that sort of messes with someone psychological, and I just find that we as a society have to do more, towards this issue.
For me, like they said, it was an assignment, but I feel like it's still such a big part of what's happening right now, and it's obviously going to go in the history books because it's the first genocide that's been broadcasted so lively and so vividly, and the fact that we are still not in a permanent case fire just shows how powerful the people above us are. They say that they're for the people and that we have the right to freedom of speech, but they're not actually doing anything to change it. And even South Africa, they did a whole lawsuit and it's still not approved, which is what power do we actually have if they're not hearing all the millions of people protesting, the millions of people in Gaza broadcasting lively, showing their testimonies on what's going on. It just shows how inhumane the US government is. And I feel I was so passionate about it because this is not something that's just started on October 7th. It's something that's been happening for years on years on years. And it's good to know about this because we are the change, and we need to know exactly what to do to change. And it can be discouraging seeing that we still don't have a case fire, but the more that we speak out about it, the more that people know about it, and the more people we get to join all these protests, to join all these boycotts, which will eventually affect the government and get a case fire.
Other questions for any of the panelists? Can you read me the name of the book that you're?
Born Both by Haida Veloria. Yeah.
Other questions? I'd like to ask Felecia, what a fascinating paper, what a fascinating woman Mary Church Terrell is, just extraordinary. community leader, civil rights activist, business leader, graduate school professor, writer, intellectual during the 1800s and early to mid 1900s. Now, why don't I know about her? So-
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't either.
Right.
And to know that, you know, just like her association, you know, she founded, you know, the women's organization, it was, you're not taught, our history is messed up. Our history is dominated by what society feels is what should be normal. If you're not normal, you're automatically wrong. If you're not a certain color, if you're not a certain way, it's like if you're not what society wants you to be, is just automatically banned. And now the fact that they're banning books and they're banning history, you can't even find this information out. And it's to the point where now Google is changing where they're not even going to report news anymore. So it's the point of restricting people from knowing this information. And Black people only know basic people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and, you know, the 5 people that you learn in school. So the fact that this class make you dive in deep about, you know, your own gender, your own race, and then you start discovering, that's why my paper's so long. Every time I went in, she was the first, and it was like, but I also feel that her, I stated, her complexion and her family's money helped her become the first. Also, this would have been a whole different story. It would have been more outstanding if she didn't come from wealth and she was, you know, hobnobbing with Frederick Douglass and things like that. It would have been, how did you get there? But sometimes your family connections or the people you know can put you in spaces and areas to where you meet other people. So I think self-education, not going against the fold, even like when you're raised, you might be raised racist, you might be raised this, but once you become an adult, you have the idea to be say, you know, to say to yourself, is this right? Even though I was taught it, even though the books tell you, like where they say slavery was a choice, it wasn't, you know. So it's like, once you're younger, you are fed all this information, and once you become an adult, it's now your turn to self-educate yourself and figure out, do you want to go with society or you want to be the first?
Now, do you think the people who are in charge of making decisions about movie productions, music production, books that get published, do you think that if they were about people like Mary Church Terrell, who is such a great role model for all women, for all people, do you think we would live in a different type of society if the mass media, the people behind the corporate media?
I think we would, but society loves damage. Society loves reality TV. Society wants to see people get slapped. Society don't want to hear about if someone changed the world. If you're trying to change the world, and if you don't have mass of millions of people behind you, you get assassinated. Anybody that has tried to change the world, they have died at a very young age, either in their 30s or their 40s. So if you're going to change the world, you have to accept that you might have to die to change your race or whatever, you know, you're going into. You might, you know, be in prison because your ideas is not with the masses. So for television, when you try to show something uplifting, like they had a movie, Hidden Figures, where it was all these African-American women that founded NASA. Don't nobody talk about NASA. Don't nobody state that African-Americans were smart and not, you know, inferior. So those narratives, if it don't come from the culture and people don't go to support it in the movies, it don't become recognized. Like they had, they just did The Little Mermaid, and it was a black girl. People protested that. She wasn't black in the regular movie, so we're not going to support that. But Barbie made $1 billion. So as an individual, if we don't show up, don't let it change. So you can't say you want to make people change, but then you don't show up for it to change, especially that the election is about to occur. If you don't show up, you don't have a voice. No matter if they hide the ballots and all this other stuff, it starts from you and then as a collective, that's the only way.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for talking about Mary Church Terrell today and introducing her to so many of us and through our channel. And that's what we need to do, is to bring more uplifting content to our social media and to spread the word that way, because I don't know that we're necessarily always going to get the kind of, mass corporate media that we want. That's good for our kids, that's good for our communities, and good for women.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Another question, the books that she wrote, Lynching from a Negro's Point of View and Lifting Blacks Up as They Climb Up. How can we do that today? What do you think the best way to do that is today?
I feel avenues for books are becoming more obtainable now. To the point where you can write a book, find a way that Amazon can sell it and promote it to where it become audio. In the 1800s, anything that was, not with the dominant culture, it was either getting burned, it was getting banned and things like that. So for her to do all this when like slavery and everything, was very present, was it make me want to say, they don't talk about like what she experienced though. They say what she fought for. So it's like, even though you see your friend get, your friend got lynched, it's not talking about how she felt about it. If she was, of course, you were sad and things like that, but it was like all her life experiences made her who she was, and that's for every individual. Even if you had trauma, you have to figure out what was the trauma. Either you're gonna be a victim or you're gonna be a survivor, and then you're gonna make a change. So for her books, I wish I can find some. Now I know, the name, and hopefully if they're still being published now, but a lot of books are being banned. So it's like, how do you find this lost information that was either burnt? There's a lot of stuff that was burnt, from Moore's history. There's a lot of people's history was eliminated, and you can't find it. So I will say, if you're a writer, if you know someone, now Amazon and you got social media is a curse and it's a blessing. So you can put it out there, but it's the point of, if you're going too much against the grain, is it gonna get some circulation? Yeah.
You might get banned on YouTube,
Yeah.
but there's Rumble, BitChute. People are finding ways
Yes.
around the censorship to
Yes.
just keep pushing.
Yes. It's a time for change, but it's not by the few. It have to be by the masses all the time. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Thank you.
again. Kenia, that was such a powerful talk, and this is really a heartbreaking time for people in Gaza and around the world whose hearts break for what's going on. Why is it that it's mostly women and children who are being killed by the bombs, rather than you think of like male operatives in Hamas who you think would be targeted? Why so many innocent civilians?
I read that there's proof, and I've read that even though the Israeli government portrays that they're going after Hamas, there's proof that Hamas hasn't been around in the areas. And if they were trying to target Hamas, why haven't they done it already? Why has it been mainly civilians dying, millions of civilians dying? And why are they evacuating all the civilians into one area of, which is Rafah right now, which is where they are right now? And if they were trying to get Hamas, and if it was a war, why is it not back and forth, and it's only constant bombing towards Gaza?
I also feel it's a depopulation. If you go after women, the women produce the children. You go after children, they can't grow up to produce other children. So it's a sense of depopulation. I feel is They know what they're doing, and they feel for some reason men still run the world. So if you get rid of the women, we're gonna produce these other races, this race. So
And that is one part of South Africa's argument, right, against Israel, is that this is genocide because you are targeting women, children, civilians, and it doesn't seem to be a legitimate response to what happened on October 7th at this point.
And even if they still claim to not want to get, like she said, like wipe out the women and the children, then why are they bombing hospitals? Why are they bombing hospitals where all the infants are and like kids are like it's so vivid. There's kids, women giving birth and the kids having to die because like they don't have a source of kids that need ICU. They don't have the power. They don't have the food for them. They don't have there's premature labor happening because a mother is experiencing so much trauma around her that she's in distress that she just has to get the baby out, and the baby can't keep itself alive, and they don't have the equipment to keep the baby alive. So yeah, I think that they're just trying to get rid of.
Yeah, I read yesterday from a reliable source that there are a lot of Palestinian women who engage in vitro fertilization, and they just the center where a lot of the fertilized eggs were stored was bombed, which is quite sad. Do you know approximately now how many women and children have been murdered in Gaza?
I think 26,000 according to Gaza officials, but there's still like a lot of people under the rubble. Like they don't have the actual account of all the people that have because they're lost.
Yes. No. Now, the issue of free speech keeps coming up in our sessions, and are you finding that college students are having a hard time? Are they getting arrested, or are they having difficulty on college campuses trying to protest what appears to be a genocide?
Yeah, I feel like I think it was like a couple months ago in Cal Poly, they were it was like 3 students protesting very peacefully at the career fair, and they were arrested and charged and set bail for like 5 million, something like that. So they're college students, they can't afford that kind of money. So I think that they definitely I feel like we are the voice and we should be strong enough to continue to spread awareness of this, but when it comes to higher ups constantly using intimidating tactics to not speak out, like even talking about this right now is kind of like, it's a scary subject and a very touchy, but I feel like we should.
Yeah, the Catholic Church apparently just came out recently against the occupation of Palestinian territory. And so that's, but people are up against a real pushback. Now, why do you think that is in the United States? Where is that pushback coming from?
I feel like
Very powerful lobbies.
Yeah, we've given the government so much money already, and honestly, it's all about money. It's what they can gain from the land and what the U.S. government can gain. So it's U.S. government profit off of that, and also they get to Israel and Palestinians have always had rivalry over the land. So I feel like it has to be about money and control, being able to control the people there and being able to extinct a whole population. And if they can do it now, what makes us think that we're not next?
Excellent, thank you. Orlando talked about very important topics, the idea of children who are born intersex, and what does a parent do, what does a doctor advise, and how difficult a decision that is, how difficult a situation that is, particularly as medicine changes. And yet, can we as a society be comfortable with not only we realize there's a continuum about gender and how we express ourselves, but can people just be more comfortable that there's a continuum even with biological sex, and that maybe the drastic surgeries, which have lifelong consequences, may not always be the best, if ever, way to go for people who will never have an orgasm, who will never be able to have children, and how difficult that is. Now, is this something that parents get to choose? Is it a medical decision that becomes really informed by an authority?
I think that like I would say that there's probably examples where the doctor can kind of see that this is like or like a life-threatening decision, and so they might step in. But I think that parents have a say.
So it can be life-threatening, so the parents really have to
Yeah.
make a difficult decision. Yeah, the idea of it, the infant has no informed consent, obviously. And even informed consent can be questionable even as a teenager. But I think your paper from a more biological point of view addresses the idea of diversity and what it means to be human. And so much of what we're talking about today has to do with so many ways that we are diverse, including even biologically, as it's expressed, and what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man. Okay, well, I would like to, unless other people have questions, I'd like to thank our panel.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what he said. I read a lot of books about this. I also know someone that is dealing with this, and I feel that unless it's life-threatening, you should give your child the opportunity to, when it can voice what it wants to be. And then you can take that element if you want to have some type of surgery. But I think parents give off what they want their child to be, and whatever that's supposed to look like, based on traits or based on how you feel, religious wise and things like that. And that what hinders the child. And then, like you said, the person grew up and had a whole menstrual cycle, but I've been dressing like a boy and no one ever told me, I was something else. So it's the fact that I think people have what they want individuals to be, and these individuals grow up and now either they're confused and they have, their own judgment. So I would say that, as a parent, really start talking to your kids and not putting your personal drama and environment, because then you raise, confusion, and then they're the next generation and they're trying to figure themselves out because they got taught all these beliefs that came from parents that's usually, had their own trauma. So I think your paper was outstanding.
I think all three papers. I would like to Felecia. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you can stand up, I'd like to take a picture of everybody. I'm trying to get it together. Wait a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have an hour lunch break, and then we'll come back for afternoon sessions. Thank you, great job, thank you. Thank you, that was, yeah. Thank you, I'd love to see that. Magazine. It's such an important topic. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I really, once I did it, I realized. Yeah, I was really honored to.
We need to get her.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say thank you, I was nervous and said. Yeah,
Very, very important.
yes, thank you so much. Have a nice day, thank you.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
terrific.
Thank
Excellent
you.
job. Very good.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone, to our afternoon session. We had some lively, exciting, thought-provoking presentations this morning. And looking forward to our afternoon session where we'll hear student presentations on gender and the law, social aspects of sexuality, feminism and power, gender roles, and women's liberation. We'll begin with Ayesha Prasad. Do you want to introduce yourself and your topic, please?
My name is Ayesha Prasad. My title of my paper is Catherine McKinnon, Women's Life, Men's Laws, and it's just like a literature review of some of her chapters.
Would you speak a little louder? So, thank you. Sorry.
My name is Ayesha, and the title of my paper is Catherine McKinnon's Women's Lives, Men's Laws. And in the 20th century, inequality between men and women still remains prominent today. But what if I were to tell you that this inequality is deeper than just women being seen as inferior? Catherine McKinnon's book, Women's Lives, Men's Laws, seeks to expose and analyze how current and past legislation has legally allowed inequality between men and women in America. She exemplifies this notion by providing information and personal experiences with these laws to showcase just how lawmakers allow gender-based discrimination to remain. Firstly, in Chapter 13, she explores the lack of civil rights female prostitutes have and how they are disproportionately targeted by police because of their gender. Furthermore, Chapter 20 looks at how liberal feminism has kept these sexist pieces of legislation to remain. Finally, in Chapter 29, she asserts the need to condemn pornography and showcases her efforts to create legislation in order to protect women and others from its damaging effects. To begin, Chapter 13, titled Prostitution and Civil Rights, explains how female prostitutes have failed to be protected by the 13th Amendment and are targeted disproportionately more than male prostitutes. Firstly, she addresses that the 13th Amendment was made to condemn slavery and indentured servitude in America. One of the core civil rights for all Americans is the protection against slavery and ensuring no one can be forced to do something against their will. Yet, under this amendment, prostitution is not viewed as slavery or indentured servitude. McKinnon explores this statement further as she describes how prostitution is slave-like, specifically how prostitution pushes women to commit sexual acts in exchange for money, and their bodies are used in labor in demeaning ways by men. Not to mention, they are most likely controlled or forced to work by pimps. Prostitution is an industry that is exploitive and treats women like slaves. They're forced to work and perform whatever is asked of them, and in return, they are given money. But their pimps take a share of that money without needing to sacrifice their body for their cut. Thus, women in prostitution are in a constant cycle of servitude by men for men. Moreover, prostitutes actually face punishment by police when caught, and their customers are often let go scot-free, while also being criminalized disproportionately more than male prostitutes. After failing to be protected from this industry, these women are then pushed further because of their gender, once again facing discrimination and injustice at the hands of the system. The author's solution to this oppressive cycle is to create legislation on a smaller scale. For instance, state-level legislation allows these women to be protected under civil rights that are not bluntly stated in federal laws. Though the federal law may not protect prostitutes, state legislation can directly state this and be able to protect these women. By creating creating specific laws in a manner that directly includes them and it grants them their rightful civil rights a bit more clearly and explicitly. Next, I'll be talking about chapter 20, titled Liberalism and the Death of Feminism. And it basically discusses how the liberal feminist movement has actually strayed away from the core ideals of feminism. For instance, McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin drafted an anti-pornography bill focused on banning pornography because of the harm it produces. But a liberal feminist group called FACT actually opposed the bill and expressed that women should be able to enjoy porn just as men do. This feminist group thought just because men enjoy porn that women should too. In efforts to be equal with men, they uplifted an industry that degrades and harms women. This is what liberal thinking entails, as the author further mentions, where feminism was collective, liberalism is individualistic. We have been reduced to that. Liberal feminism brings in individualistic ideals that further divide women. These divisions can cause negative impacts on all women, as liberal feminist voices are commonly the ones that are most heard. Therefore, the author's solution is to highlight the negative effects and urge the movement to return back to a collective front. What has been achieved for women through the politics of liberalism? The ERA has been lost, abortion funding has been lost, nothing significant has been accomplished with rape law reform. McKinnon clearly showcases that liberal feminism has not brought any significant progression for women. Therefore, feminism needs to return back to the united front they once had so the pathway to liberation can resume. Next, I'll be talking about chapter 29, titled The War on the Other Side of Silence, which follows McKinnon and Dworkin's work in creating an anti-pornography bill ordinances in different cities. To begin, McKinnon mentions how victims of pornography have ranged from women being forced to create these films to women being raped as subjects for imitations of these films. Essentially, these testimonies were presented to show how harmful pornography is for everyone. Both the creation and consumption of this material makes the treatment of women worse and subject them to harm. Unfortunately, some of these ordinances were not passed in these cities and were deemed unconstitutional as it was seen to have violated free speech. Free speech in the existence of porn triumphed the safety of women. Considering the potential solution to this problem was rejected, McKinnon offers advice on how to move forward. She quotes, "When women can assert human rights against them through a law that victims can use themselves, women will have the right place in the world. Currently, women's safety may not be at the center of American society, but in order to move forward to make the world safer for women, legislation must be in place to further regulate and condemn the entities that seek to oppress women." Overall, McKinnon's insights on the harms that prostitution, liberal feminism, and pornography creates has opened my eyes to the clear misogynistic tropes that are embedded in the legislation that we have today. Firstly, prostitution only continues as a form of modern-day slavery and treats women involved as less than because of its sexual nature and taboo. In today's world, women are allowed to create their own material on their own terms without the need for pimps. Yet these acts still put other women at risk, as many can be manipulated or coerced into this practice and exploited. Next, liberal feminism will prevent women from liberation because of its individualistic ideals. Personally, I can vouch that the feminist movement is more divided than ever. On social media, I see feminists argue over contradicting goals of the movement, and the time for cohesion is now. Finally, pornography does more harm than good for everyone involved. When I read about the girl who was assaulted by a group of boys trying to act out a pornographic film, it broke my heart. I too once thought that if porn was made ethically and consensually, then there is no harm. But its interpretation of it to consumers can result in events like the ones mentioned above. In essence, McKinnon's work and insights have further solidified the need for a more unified feminist front, whose goals need to return to the protection of women in all aspects of life, specifically in the aspect of legislation.
Thank you, Ayesha. Well done. Okay. Brenda, would you like to go?
Sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Calderon, and now my assignment is on Betty Friedan, This is all. In today's society, there are still gender differences between men and women. Men are making more money than women. Men have higher positions than women. Men are presidents, governors, and even held the highest rank in military. To my knowledge, women have been spoken more than ever about issues they're facing, such as harassment in workplace, violence, discrimination, and gender inequality. One may believe that an issue like gender inequality can be solved fast, but unfortunately, that issue hasn't been fixed. It is because of gender differences sustains male dominance. In the YouTube video, Dorothy Smith's Standpoint Theory by Deborah Marshall, it is mentioned women are forced to live in a patriarchal structure. Men do not treat women as equal partners. Society has given the idea of what the role of a woman should be, what her appearance should be, and what age should a woman be married and have kids. The reason behind gender inequality is because gender differences sustains male dominance. Unfortunately, this male dominance can influence laws, wages, and economy that can affect others such as minorities and women, so the man can hold power and control. Women have fought for rights for a long time and still are fighting for. For example, in February of 2022, the U.S. women's national soccer team signed an equal pay agreement after fighting for equal pay for so many years. Women have used their voices and experience to share with others what they have gone through and to inspire others to use their voices and fight for what is right. Betty Friedan, author of The Feminine Mystique and the Problem That Has No Name, describes white women in the 1950s and 1960s who were middle class and lived in suburban cities. And she interviewed them and basically asked how they felt being a wife and mother. Women were conceived to the idea that a woman's dream is to get married and have children and to live in a beautiful home. Images from magazine, newspaper, and television ads, such as the suburban housewife at home kissing her husband goodbye as he leaves for paid work, sending her kids off to school, and finding joy in cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Some came to the realization that being a wife and a mother were not making them happy or making them feel good about themselves. Some women felt that there was something wrong with them when they were not having satisfaction of feeling fulfillment when having the role of as a housewife. Even though Betty Friedan was focusing on the life of a middle-class white woman, I felt that the things that she mentioned in the course textbook and the YouTube video, I can relate to. Even though I'm not a white woman, I am a 30-year-old woman who got married at the age of 20, gave birth to my first child at age 21, had my second child at age 28. I have been working since I was 18 years old. I graduated from a trade school at age 20, but didn't continue with the career because I became a mom. When I read the average marriage age of a woman in America dropped to 20, and it was still dropping into the teens. I was shocked at how young women were getting married at that time. I watched the show Say Yes to the Dress and I'm surprised at the age of the girls who just finished high school are now looking for bridal dresses instead of pursuing a career, and their families are okay with the decisions. Yes, I did get married at age 20, but my husband and I do agree that we did get married at a young age and that we did not live our life to the fullest in our 20s. And as of now, we're still, not living our fullest. Since we are prioritizing our children, we learn from our experiences and mistakes. And we wish we had someone that would convince or talk to us not to get married at a young age, to advise us to get a career and to save up to buy a house and to have saving in case of something would happen. Even though my mother is a huge part of my life, I don't remember her telling me not to get married, but I think it's because she was a woman who got married at 17 and had me at 18. She came to the US at the age of 17 from Mexico, not knowing anything about this country and figuring everything out on her own. But I think her knowledge was not enough to convince me. One thing she did tell me was that I need to make sure that I have money saved up in case of something would happen in my marriage, such as divorce, and I can have the secure money to move on from the relationship. My mom ended up separating from my dad when I was 17 years of age. She did have a job at the moment, but she had to work really hard in order to take care of us, and she didn't have any savings. I always thought to myself that if I ever get married and I end up getting a divorce or something happens to my husband, I want to make sure that I have money I can depend on. Her advice always stuck in my mind. One day while I was working, I was taking a married couple's order, and the husband asked me if my job was hiring so that his wife could apply and start working. The wife was shocked and surprised that her husband said that. She said to her husband, "I am not working." Then she turned to me and asked me, "Don't you agree that the husband should be the only one working and taking care of the family?" I replied by saying I don't really agree with her question. I asked her, "What are you gonna do if all of a sudden your husband can no longer work due to illness or loss of job?" She didn't respond. Sometimes I will make small complaints about me working and that I should be at home instead. When I was on maternity leave for 3 months, every day I was doing the same tasks as a housewife. Cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, taking care of my child or children. I really was not enjoying staying at home and doing the role of a housewife. I came to think how housewives can do this every day. How did my mom do this for so many years? I realized that I can't be a housewife, that being at home wasn't bringing me any happiness that I thought would bring me. I missed my independence of providing for myself. I missed the little freedom I had away from my house. In the textbook, Friedan mentions that some women will ask themselves, "Is this all?" Most women would say, "I want something more than my husband and my children in my home." While I was being a wife, mother, and employee, I was still thinking that something was missing in my life, or what was my calling. As my children were getting older and I was having time for myself, I realized that I wanted to be a preschool teacher. I decided to go to Chabot College in the summer of 2018. It took me 3.5 years to earn my degree, and now I'm attending Cal State East Bay. Betty Friedan mentions in her interview, "It took 5 years to write a book. It is comforting to know that it is comforting to know that it's okay to take time to complete something, and one can be successful as long as one completes it." In her interview, she mentioned some people, especially other women, were not open to the idea of having success or even writing a book. When I decided to start applying to college, I excitedly told my coworker, who was about 12 to 15 years older than me, about my goals. She told me, "You can't go to school. You're a mom. You need to take care of your children." I was shocked when she told me this. I thought to myself, I thought women should be supporting other women. It made me wonder, was she jealous? Would she say the same thing to her granddaughters if they were in the same position as me? My ambition and the support of my family, I'm still able to continue my education. Growing up, I would hear that girls play with dolls and boys play with cars, or that girls wear pink and boys wear blue. As a kid, I didn't understand why people would say these type of comments. I personally don't like shopping because it's hard for me to find clothes in my size. I'm short and have curves. I felt that the clothes, especially dresses, were meant for people who were skinny. Going to college has helped me understand why people would say these comments or why clothes were a certain way. One thing I learned is that the reason why dolls were created was was because it would help little girls practice on becoming mothers. Clothes were built for boys to develop their masculinity. When shopping for my daughter's clothes, I've noticed that the shorts were really short, crop tops were the latest fashion, and I was like, why do little girls need to show a lot of skin? This class has helped me understand men's dominance is evidenced in the multi-billion-dollar cosmetic industry, which promotes an ideal of slim, adolescent-like, sexualized beauty that women aspire in order to feel attractive. In the YouTube video, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Simone de Beauvoir, mentions that baby girls are molded to become women. Betty Friedan mentions a couple of things that I can relate to. One of the things she mentions that women needed to have a chance to explore their life purposes before they make a life-changing decision, such as getting married and having a family. As I previously mentioned, I got married at 20 and gave birth to my son at 21. Even though I've been married for almost 18 years, I can share that my marriage hasn't been easy at times. My experience has motivated me to share with others, such as my nieces, my coworkers, my daughter, and even my son, that they should consider accomplishing as many goals as possible, such as traveling, having fun, earning a degree, buying a house, saving up before they get married or before they move in together with their significant other, or having children at a young age. I don't want my daughter and nieces to live the same life as I did. I want them to be independent and successful and to have work experience so that they don't have to depend so much on their husbands in case something happens. Another thing that she mentioned is that if husbands took more responsibility in the home with the housework and childcare, women would have the opportunity to pursue their dreams outside the home. I can say that I am thankful to have my husband's support, and he encouraged me not to give up, especially the first day of this spring semester. I ended up having COVID on the first day. I wanted to drop down the first week. I started to worry and stress out because I couldn't concentrate or fully understand the assignments, or if I could catch up because COVID was affecting me. He told me not to give up and that I will do well like always. Thanks to his words, I'm here presenting my assignment. He told me that he wants me to earn my degree. Ever since I started attending Cal State East Bay, he has been helping me more in the house. I advise my son that when he decides to be in a relationship or decides to get married, he needs to help around the house and support his significant other in the best way possible. Thank you.
Okay, Maureen, would you like to go?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Maureen Smith, and my paper is on the social constructionalism of sexuality. Sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today to share some insights on the fascinating intersection of sexuality and social theories through my research, and to the work of the theorist Stephen Seedman, who urged that our understanding of sexuality isn't just shaped by individual experiences, but by broader social movements. In particular, we'll be exploring how socialism, the women's movement, and LGBTQ+ activism has played a role in the development of major social theories of sexuality, including Marxism and feminism. In chapter 1 of the Sex and Science, Sexology, and Psychoanalyst, Seedman argues that it was not psychoanalysts who developed a consistent social perspective on sexuality. Rather, it emerged out of three great social and intellectual movements of the 20th century: socialism, the women's movement, and the lesbian and gay movement. These movements gave birth to three great social theories of sexuality, respectively: Marxism, feminism, and social constructionism. In chapter 2 of Social Theories of Sexuality, Marxism, and Feminism, Seedman opens this chapter with the argument that one of Karl Marx's great insights was that human nature is shaped by society and changes historically. From this perspective, sexuality can also be understood as something that is social and historical. Marxists argue that the economy is the most important social force shaping human society. Every society is organized around a specific economic system. From this perspective, Seidman argues a particular type of economy shapes a specific sexual culture, and he analyzes the relationship between capitalism and sexuality. Through the 19th century, a market-based capitalism was dominant. Since the early 20th century, capitalism has been shaped by large corporations. In the market capitalist phase, the chief economic challenge is to produce enough goods to meet the needs of the whole population. Capitalists need a disciplined labor force. Ideally, capitalists would like to see laborers become almost machine-like, because anything that interferes with maximizing production, such as emotion or erotic feeling, is an impediment of efficient production. In short, in the market economy of the 19th century, capitalists tried to desexualize laborers and fashion their bodies and physical movements to the machinery of production. In a market economy, therefore, according to Seidman, a repressed personality type is prominent. This kind of person is performance and success-oriented and exercises tight controls over emotions and sensual desires. In this type of economy, the definition of legitimate sex is narrowed to intercourse for the purpose of procreation. According to Marxists, this procreation sexual ethic reflects capitalism's need for a large mobile supply of laborers. Sex oriented to pleasure, sex outside of marriage, autoerotic sex, sex in public, non-heterosexual sex, and non-genital sex were acceptable and deviant. Marxists argue this is because they were at odds with the capitalism's need for disciplined work-oriented productive workers. Between the 19th and 20th centuries, capitalism shifted from a market to a corporate economy. The huge corporation replaced the small business as the major economic institution, and this shift brought about changes in modern sexual culture. By the early 20th century, new technologies and a scientific approach to the labor process solved the problem of producing enough goods and services. A new problem confronted capitalism. According to Seidman, how could it ensure that the vast sea of goods now being produced would be consumed? Marxists argue that the new consumer economy weakened the Victorian culture and its emphasis on privacy, self-control, and the desexualization of the body and intimacy. Where the Victorians wanted to keep sex a private matter, consumer capitalism brought sexuality into the public world of commerce and advertising. Sex sold products and the the commercialization of sex challenged Victorian culture. Capitalism placed a new value on sex as a source of pleasure. Sex wasn't just for procreation or marriage. Sex was now about pleasure and self-expression. Capitalism tries to produce goods that people want, and commodities carry social meaning as a marker of social class or culture identity. For example, our sense of self, Marxists argue, becomes tightly connected to the goods we buy. Today, some of our deepest wants and needs to be considered powerful, sexy, and attractive are closely connected to the goods we purchase and display. Businesses deliberately market goods and services by selling fantasies of beauty, sexual potency, romance, and social power. Marxists argue that corporate capitalism creates a highly seductive and sexualized world in which impulse reigns, and accordingly, a new personality type steps forward. Hedonistic, expressive, impulsive, and highly sexualized. Corporate capitalism promotes a culture that values sexual pleasure. Sexuality is now often viewed as a natural and positive basis of self-fulfillment. To Marxists, however, this pleasure-oriented sexual culture does not promote real sexual freedom. A culture that celebrates a superficial drive for pleasure leads to fulfillment, but not to aimless, unhappy search for gratification. Moreover, Marxists argue That sexuality focuses on technique and performance comes to resemble work. Accordingly, it loses much of its tender, intimate, and caring qualities. Also, Marxists argue that as we search for happiness, the gross inequalities between the rich and poor go unchallenged. There can be no real freedom until there is real freedom, individual freedom, which is impossible under capitalism. Feminists point out that all of us are introduced to the world as men or women, regardless of the economic system. Feminists view gender as a society, as a social identity, and a set of norms that are supposed to guide behavior. We are not born men or women. We acquire these gender inequalities or identities through a social process of learning, sometimes through coercion. Feminists argue that our sexual desires, feelings, and preferences are deeply imprinted by our gender statuses. The end.
Okay. Orlando?
I could give. Capitalism thrives off the overproduction and extensive labor of all working individuals. Large corporations and small businesses alike aim to augment their profits at the expense of those that put in the work. This is especially true for the women in our society. Capitalism and Women's Liberation, written by Michelle Beret, brings awareness to this issue by offering the reader insight as to how women are continuously being repressed by men in this system. This chapter brings forward a new perspective by challenging how she is limited to staying at home and remaining below her male peers at work. In this reflection paper, we will be analyzing and critiquing how a woman's role is governed by capitalism. The survival of our species hundreds of thousands of years ago heavily depended on the fact that men almost always did all of the hunting while women were left catering for the next generation. Over time, humanity has adapted to this and made it the norm. A man's constant role as a breadwinner governs to what extent a woman can enter the labor force. It is thanks to the second wave of feminism in the 1960s through the 80s that allowed for a lady to be able to work more openly. Women, however, are still faced with hardships considering the responsibilities she has to take care of domestically. Michelle Beret's work sheds light on how not much of an advancement has been made for the feminist movement when we consider that they are still weighed down by the shackles that oppress them, mastered by the system. In contemporary times, it is not uncommon to see a woman working in careers, jobs, and other professions that were once dominated by men. This reading shows how feminists in contemporary times had to fight even harder than ever before for there to be change in the gender inequality that is found in the workplace and beyond. A woman takes on the role of Cinderella as she takes care of various tasks, house tasks such as cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children, running errands, and making sure the needs of the husband are met. Let us keep in mind that all of these duties are on top of the job or jobs that she has to go to in the morning to begin with. The division of labor makes it difficult for women to advance in their careers because they have a list full of responsibilities to take care of once they arrive home. This debacle is all rooted in the capitalistic world that we live in. Aside from forcing women to partake in a double shift, the capitalist system has other ways of exploiting how women are treated and perceived on a macro level. An example of this can be noted when we consider how capitalism profits off of this demographic annually by selling beauty products and other items that reinforce female body image. The fashion and beauty industries promote products that are unrealistic in nature. This market forces women to buy and use this merchandise to fit into the mold of standard beauty. It is alarming to think about how this reinforcement of gender stereotypes is toxic for women and young girls. An answer to this may be to promote a female body positivity movement that shies away from purchase and usage of such products. The gender gap found in the workforce has allowed for there to be an unequal balance in the working conditions between both sexes. Men get paid at a higher rate for the same job title, are praised more by their superiors, and do not experience any form of harassment as frequently as women do. This unequal distribution of resources may restrict how willing she is to commit to a job, as well as limit her ability to attain a high ranking or leadership role. More than this, Michelle Beret goes on to note that this gender inequality is not restricted to any particular class. Women with other intersectional features such as race, class, physical disability are more affected by this phenomenon. There's still certainly a long journey ahead of us if we want to see an improvement and change in this department. The ways in which the feminist community is able to seek and implement resolutions to this issue is by changing the narrative. It will be most effective if the household rearranges how it is structured. Familialism should refocus its attention so that both sexes are equally contributing to the domestic responsibilities. Men may have a preconceived notion that household chores and taking care of the children are feminine in nature, when in reality, their presence in the household will alter how women are treated for the better. The applause goes to the men that are willing to help their wives with the household chores that limit her ability to breathe. As we have seen, capitalism is fatal to women in more ways than one. The second wave of feminism was successful because of its advancement for women to enter the labor force. Although it has allowed for women to do so more openly, this in turn has altered how she is treated at her job, the local store, or at home. More issues have risen as a result of these restrictions, such as the double shift that reinforces the narrative that she needs to remain at home. The unequal treatment in the workforce is another factor that contributes to how this system is harmful. Capitalism makes women spend more money so that these major corporations profit from them by the millions. These are all examples that we must reflect on so that our community can seek the change that it so desperately wishes for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's so many great topics raised. Questions from the audience for our panelists? Quick question. Did Bianca Ventura come? Bianca Ventura or all right, so let's, I'd like to ask Ayesha some questions about prostitution and slavery. I think that's a fascinating idea and legal concept. Because if, and the idea that the states, rather than the federal law, seem to be able to tackle this, according to Catherine McKinnon. Why do you think it is that on the state level, they're able to make changes that I think of prostitution as a form of human trafficking? How are they able to do it on a state level, and why can't the federal government step in on this extremely important issue?
I think on the state level, it's just a little bit easier because as with the anti-pornography bill, like it kind of showcased how they were able to come together and really showcase it to the different states that we need something like this. So I think like working on a smaller level like that is good. And I guess on a federal level, it could happen. Like, I know a lot of people come before Congress to talk about topics like this, and that's how the topic of getting this legislation to be created happens. But I think on the state level, it's just a little bit easier because that way we can bring in experts, we can bring in people who've experienced things like this and kind of plead this case to the state judges. So that's kind of what happened with the anti-pornography bill here, where, you know, they came before the state judges to try and get this ordinance.
And the idea of liberal feminism being detrimental to women, and how when, you know, in their idea of defense of pornography, it rests upon individuals being able to participate in it as free speech, and yet it's harmful generally to women as individuals. And McKinnon is saying, why have we stopped the collective approach to protecting women from this form of slavery? And she, you know, it's why do you think there's been no progress with global feminism, and what do you think we can do to?
I honestly think there hasn't been any progress because of how divided we've become. I feel like we went through this phase where sexual liberation became our main thing, like in a way for the feminist movement. And I think we denoted that to, you know, sex is sexy and, you know, consent is sexy, but then we failed to look at the nuances of those topics. And I think that's what happened there. That's what kind of caused this division of the feminist movement, where we kind of split between, you either have radical feminists who are against pornography, and then we have other feminists who are for it because it's other people's line of work. You know, some people do OnlyFans to, you know, make money and, you know, re-support sex workers. But I think that disconnect happened because of that movement where we just looked at sexual liberation for women, because I understand that, you know, years ago, women couldn't be able to wear certain things, and they were really objectified for, I guess, like objectified for showing too much skin and stuff. And that's kind of where that happened, which is a good thing that we're able to express ourselves now. But I think we have to go back and understand that, you know, we do have this liberation, but what can we do to make it safer? Or what can we do to make it better for women collectively?
Yes, I agree. And the idea of protecting women as a group, and I don't think anybody wants, you know, when their child wants to grow up, it's not usually a dream, and we want people to be able to reach their dreams. And how do we do that? Brenda, talking about violence and workplace harassment, and the idea of gender difference as dominance. And why is it? Because I think this theme has come up in pretty much every paper today. Why is difference often turned into inequality dominance? Why can't we just appreciate that there's difference in there? It doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be hierarchical. That it, you know, that difference can be appreciated along a sphere of equality rather than inequality.
I feel like women are, I feel like with the male dominance, I feel like they feel threatened. I feel like that a certain man, they feel threatened that maybe a female could do better decisions. They don't want to lose the control. They want to like do everything themselves. So like, even though if you ask for help from a female, society created that showing you maybe sort of weakness.
So a sense of masculinity,
There you go, that's the word.
and how they're raised, and how masculinity, how we see it in film, and music, and all of that makes it difficult for men to show respect sometimes for women. And you know, that's difficult. How can we improve that? Because not all men are that way.
No, of course not.
So how can we help those men who feel somehow intimidated by a woman?
I mean, I think first it starts at home. I think because, you know, boys or girls are taught from the beginning how you're supposed to be raised, you know, be raised, or your thoughts. But of course, giving them, like in my case, I will show my daughter my resources that I found. Like, you know, I'll find or show her. Like, she wanted to be here. You know, what kind of would have motivated her to, you know, be independent.
Sure.
But as far as like, I think everything starts at home. Giving the whether if it's a guy or a female, giving the chance to go to college. Because that now more than ever that I see that there's more resources in universities that you're not gonna find anywhere else. So, you know, promoting them to go to school, you know, as a female, you know, let the young man be sensitive. Let the guy be understand, be on your shoes, not on your shoes, but understand your feelings, that it's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to, you know, it's okay that you don't have to be the dominant person. But of course, in both ways, you have to show respect towards each other.
Yes. Respect, so key. I think of your brave mother who came into this country and had a child at a young age and raised you. And the lessons that she had to share with you and the lessons that you now share with your children, and how these, generational family thoughts and experiences, they get passed down, and we learn from each other, and just how key that is. And to think of her as brave, how difficult that must have been to go to another country at a young age. That's very brave. And so I just want to show some respect to her, what she did for you. And I think, many of these topics end up going back to raising children. How do we raise our sons? How do we raise our daughters? You go into a large box store like Target and you looked at the toy section and it's vastly different. Well, how come? Why is it so incredibly different? And why is the toys for boys often involve violence? And, we really have to maybe think that one through. And I think we've evolved or evolving, we were on farms, lots of, doing sustainable farming, and then we went to factories. The factories, a lot of them have left. And now we're going into more flexible work, right? Flexible work from home. And do you think that this is going to help families, men and women and children, thrive more with more respect and less domination in the family? Do you think this provides an opportunity with more flexibility?
I think it all depends, unfortunately, on where you rank yourself economically. Because of course, if you make more money, you do have more freedom, more resource, like more resources you could pay for. But if you're a minority with a low income, it's not, yes, there are resources to provide you, but it doesn't help you succeed. You will have to sacrifice one thing or another in order for you to, you probably sacrifice maybe not spending time with your children in order for you to go to school. Or, you have to make more money to be with your children. So I think it just depends on like what your main goal is. And if especially you have that support system at home, you feel like you could do anything.
Yeah, so having a support system at home, a supportive family is just so key for women. Yeah. And raising our sons to be good men and fathers. Maureen, I really liked your talk, and the critique of sexuality in terms of becoming work rather than tenderness in the culture we live in, and combined with we work and raising kids and so I think at this time in our history, I think we're all kind of saying, maybe we need to slow down a little bit and take it back a bit. And the absolute, I think, riveting idea of how society shapes something so personal as sexuality, that capitalism shapes it, that what the workplace needs in terms of workers, how those workers are created, what kind of workers they need to be, the discipline, they need to be well fed, well clothed, they need to have their sleep, they need to be free from childcare in many situations. And all this places extraordinary demands on different people in the family or community. And that it has largely fell to women, right? Women doing all the unpaid labor so that a person can do the paid labor. And sometimes those different roles work really well. When people want that, it works really well. As you were saying, if a person gets sick, can't work, passes away, divorces you, then what happens to women? And women have seen this over the generations, and they're feeling, I need to protect myself, to protect my kids. And so the idea of the workplace, the way it impacts the privacy of the home is just fascinating. It's a fascinating topic. And that, again, now here we have, the shift into maybe work from home, flexible. What do you think of that and how that's going to impact people and their families?
I think it still impacts because the mother is still a mother.
Mothers.
And she still provides for the home, even though, men generally provide financially, physically in some way, fixing things around the house. But then mom is still mom, she still cooks,
Yeah.
she still cleans, she still helps with homework.
Yes.
Kids get sick, she's still there, she's still the nurturer. So by nature, that's still in, some sense of, a normal, well, we won't say that it's. Yeah, because these are the norms that society have placed us with. The mother takes care of the child, the father goes out and works. What she said earlier, the girls are made to play with baby dolls and start preparing us to be mothers and nurturers, and the boys, they play with trucks and guns and things like that, so so they don't have emotions and they don't understand,
They're shooting each other. We're changing diapers.
So, even with staying at home and working remotely, we are still playing those roles. It doesn't change, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Even, you get breaks on those remote jobs. What happens when your kid is outside? What happens when they get sick? What happens when the school calls? You still are on duty no matter what happens. And men and dads, they're still playing their roles or wherever they are. So we're still left to do.
We love our moms and we love our dads, and what do you think, what things public policy can do or other institutions can do to make people happier in their private life?
Well, I think there needs to be some policies that come into place and social movements and things, because these social norms have to stop with the gender roles as far as men, the man works, the mom stays at home, she irons the clothes, she cooks. And and just growing up in the family that I grew up in, real Southern family, there was a such thing that, I grew up hearing, women should be in the kitchen. Women were made to have babies. And so when you grow up like that, just going in where we're talking about a woman being a commodity, sometimes you think that you're a commodity. I was only made to make babies, or I was only, made to be beautiful. And so sometimes you think you're just supposed to be beautiful and you're not supposed to go out and get an education. And so that's a lot what we're seeing right now, even on TV, with the girls who are superstars. They're beautiful, but behind the scenes, that's not how they actually look. So
That unrealistic.
it's unrealistic, and little girls grow up and they see this, and so they have this in the back of their minds that they are a commodity and they don't see themselves as anything else. So in society, we have to stop this and we have to change and let little girls know that they're more than a commodity, that they are smart, that they are somebody. You're not just a product for sale. And so we have to come up with policies that change these things, because it's in the music, it's in the videos, it's on YouTube, it's on social media, it's everywhere. It's all sexualizing.
Do you think that has to happen in the home?
Well, you do. You have to teach your children. And so I have children. I have all boys, but you still have to teach your children that, these things aren't okay. There's more. There's more than BCI than what's on social media. But it starts at home, and kids are impressionable, but some things you cannot stop your children from watching because it's also in the schools. And, I have one kid who's in elementary school, so there's things that they're learning at schools that you don't want your children to learn also. It's like, how do we stop these things?
Yeah, homeschooling is so difficult to carry out.
Yeah.
Really, really fascinating topic. Orlando, you raised so many important points, and again, kind of talked about the gender division of labor, and how, you know, the second shift is so difficult. And there's been a lot of academic research on housework. And it's one of those things where I think men might not even notice, or the person in the relationship who's doing all of the housework, the person not doing it, might even just, it might be invisible to them. Well, what do you think of that kind of unpaid labor and the exploitation of unpaid labor, and even disrespect of the person who's doing it?
I think that. If you repeat the question, I'm sorry.
What, repeat it?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, you know, you raised the issue of unpaid labor.
Yeah.
So the woman, say, goes to a 9-to-5 job. Her spouse, partner goes to a 9-to-5 job. They both work hard, similar educations. She comes home and starts cooking dinner. He might pick the children up. He comes home and he watches the news. She's cooking dinner. She's feeding the family. She's doing the dishes, helping the children with their homework, making sure all the forms are signed and appointments are made for the following week, make sure they get bathed and put to bed. And he's still watching the news. And that is just a gross exaggeration, because that's not often how it goes down, but sometimes it does. What do you think of paid versus unpaid labor, and what that does to the person doing so much more unpaid labor over the course of 10 years when you're raising kids?
Well, I think that
What do you
I give
think helps?
Okay.
How can a person feel respected?
I think that, you know, like, men could acknowledge
Acknowledge it.
sort of like, you know, it's a simple thank you for
Simple
doing this.
thank you. Even
Or,
yes,
you know,
as simple as thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
could, you know, make all the difference, I guess,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
those type of situations.
Yeah, definitely. And the idea of sharing responsibilities as you
right.
raised, and having talks, sit downs. How are we gonna, you know, this is what I'm doing. Let's look at what you're doing, and what do you think of this? Does this look fair to you?
Yeah,
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I agree.
Well, all of these were just terrific talks. I want to thank you so much for coming to the inaugural Women in Gender Studies Student Conference. And if anyone else has any questions, now's your opportunity to ask. Otherwise, thank you so very much. And here is Ayesha, this goes with it. Yes. This is Maureen. Thank you. Bianca.
I'm right here.
Oh, you wanna give your paper?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Here, why don't you?
This mine said it was at 3.
Yes, we were missing people and we just decided to turn the
Sorry,
two
I
sessions.
got here at 2, but
Oh, we
I
didn't see
forgot
you.
Lenny, and then,
Oh, okay.
you know, the parking issues, so I had to get that figured out first.
Well, let's have you sit down right here and give your talk.
I'm like, everyone.
Everyone get theirs? Bianca?
Yeah.
Okay. Introduce yourself and your topic or look forward to it.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Bianca. And my topic is American Housewives. So did I just start? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so today is Sunday, it's reset day. I do laundry, some homework, and play with my child. Dreading thinking about getting up early and taking my child to daycare because I work. While at work, I count down the hours till I get to be with him again. My reflection paper will be on Betty Friedan because she speaks about women who are unhappy being housewives. I believe now in this generation, those who are housewives are considered lucky. Since the economy is not doing so great, most households needs 2 incomes in order to get by. Betty Friedan designed a survey in which the results showed how women were not satisfied with their lives. Although many women praised her, she also received a lot of hate for it. Friedan focused on white, heterosexual, middle-class women. Betty Friedan knew women were capable of doing so much more than just tending to our husband and children. Back in the day, women were only allowed to speak to each other about their children or better ways to improve their skills for their husband. These women never learned how to take care of themselves in order to have a healthy relationship. Many of these women may have suffered through postpartum depression and never realized it because they were so busy trying to make their husbands happy. Imagine living in a world where it only revolves around making a man happy. Nowadays, women know their worth. They speak up and have a voice our ancestors or even parents may have not had. Becoming a first-time mother in college was very difficult for me. I began to fall behind in my college work because I had little to no help. It took me 6 months to realize that I needed to go back to work, even if that meant leaving my baby for a couple of hours. It took me 2 years to finally find a balance between family, school, and work. A man is known as a provider, yet most never provide what a child needs most, which is attention and love. Betty Friedan speaks about how women stopped going to college because they were afraid no man would want someone smarter than them. Instead of college courses, they would educate themselves on marriage and counseling. Some men can be so selfish that they do not want you to build something for yourself. Oftentimes, many men will threaten to leave you with nothing because you are not happy. Sadly, I have seen it happen to many women I know. I am no way shaming you, stay-at-home mothers, or even housewives. Sometimes I think about becoming one every day because when my child grows up, what will I have left? I believe a woman should have something, whether it be a degree or a job. We cannot fully depend on another person, especially nowadays where cheating seems to be such a popular thing. I believe that goes back to people getting married young and having children young. For example, I come from a Hispanic background where you're supposed to get married, move in, and then have children together. I was 19 years old when I got pregnant, and both of our parents were trying to force marriage on us. I respectfully declined because while my parents are divorced and marriage to me is something I truly only want to do once. Our folks try to pressure us about how they grew up, not realizing how traumatic it actually is. This is why many homes are broken because we get together so young and marry a person we barely even know. In the 1950s, women would work only if their children were at school or if they were contributing to their husband or child's education. It baffles me that women would leave everything behind because they were so afraid of being smarter, yet they still had to pay for their husbands to better themselves. This just shows us how selfless women can be, but also how selfish men are. Men should have wanted their wives to have some knowledge so that they could be a power couple. If a problem came up, they would both know how to handle it or maybe problem solve to get a solution. I understand that times were different back then, but there are many people who still believe that. Many cultures around the world are known for marrying young or arranged marriages. For example, it is very popular in Mexico for a woman to stay home, cook, clean, and take care of the children. It's the culture we grew up in, and it's not seemed to change because no one has talked about the harm it is causing. According to SaveTheChildren.org, 40 million girls ages 15 to 19 are currently married or in a union worldwide. In their article, Child Marriage, the Devastating End of Childhood, They speak about how marrying young affects these young boys and girls in many different ways. Young girls who marry are often isolated and no longer enrolled in school. This article states they are at higher risk of physical and sexual violence. Many states do not protect these young girls and instead encourage it. Women should not be having babies back to back. According to March of Dimes, for most women, it's best to wait at least 18 months between giving birth and getting pregnant again. It is so unfortunate that many of these cultures do not understand that. They just expect young girls to turn into women overnight and know exactly what to do. Martin Newman wrote an article called Unhappy Marriages and Unhappy Work Terms, Avoiding the Four Mistakes that lead to both, which gives advice on how to end up in divorce. Newman states, in the United States, nearly 40% of marriages end in divorce. Another 10 to 15% of couples separate and do not divorce, and another 7 or so stay together, but are chronically unhappy. Newman goes on to speak about how communication seems to never be there in relationships. Oftentimes, we speak about oftentimes, men or women are raised by parents who do not show their emotions. They later carry on those characteristics into their relationships. I never knew how to communicate my feelings or even give affection, if I'm going to be honest, until I became a parent. Couples often just brush things off instead of talking things out, and that's where things go wrong. Newman wrote about 4 mistakes commonly practiced in relationships, which include criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Nowadays, everything is 50-50 in marriages because the economy is so bad. Many women cannot afford to stay home because everything has gone up in price. In order to succeed in life, we need to be able to support each other. Firsthand, I have almost dropped out of college because it's difficult working, going to school, and being a mother. Until finally I broke and expressed how I truly felt to my partner. Your partner is supposed to help you and support you along the way. In this economy, we always need room for improvement. We have to network with many people to grow and level up in life. Even women who are stay-at-home wives need to learn about self-love. A child deserves a happy mother as well as seeing you happy within your relationship. When I say self-love, I mean going out and doing something you love, or maybe something new. It does not mean to ignore your responsibilities, but it is okay to take a step back and breathe. Betty Friedan received so much hate because she gave women a platform. Friedan helped these women come out and be heard. She created a movement and helped many, many women. Friedan believed that the answer to healthy, thriving families and communities was mentally healthy women able to negotiate their own choices and pursue happiness. This statement is true, just as many say a happy wife equals a happy life. Sometimes we forget to stop and take care of ourselves first. It's okay to be selfish sometimes. It does not matter if you're a working mom or a stay-at-home mom. At the end of the day, you are doing your best.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Those are, you make many, many important points, and I like the idea that relationships that have a lot of criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt, that those are predictors for divorce.
Yeah.
And so how can this is about gender, how can the women's movement, do you think, improve relationships?
I think, women now are different than women, how they were way before, because women know how to express themselves now, and I feel like once you have a child, most parents go into postpartum depression. And sometimes you're afraid to ask for help because you're like, I don't want to look like I don't know how to handle this situation,
Right.
That was me. I never told anyone or anything until it was, oh, okay, I need help.
Yeah.
So I feel like knowing that it's okay to ask for help sometimes. Even if you're like, no, I can do it by myself.
It can save lives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so feeling you live in an environment where you can ask for help, or anyone can ask.
Yeah, you can ask anyone, definitely.
And the idea of, we're in a human development, I teach a human development department, the idea that the brain develops, and it's still developing in the teen years and 20s. So we don't always have, the best, we don't always make the best long-term plans before the prefrontal cortex is finished, developing it. So it can be really challenging when you're young to make these lifelong decisions and how to educate people about that. And, it's very difficult to tell an adult, you shouldn't make this decision when they're, 25 years old, but they may not, may not be the best. So sometimes the wisdom of elders, people who keep, people of all ages in their life and share ideas can be really helpful too. And I like how you raise the idea of happy parents. Just basic people who feel good about what they're doing and enjoy being a parent and how important that is. And that what people have to figure out what needs to be in place for me to be happy parenting. Yeah, because that's essential for children to have good self-esteem. Yeah, very, very good. Other questions?
Question.
Yeah.
So I'm a mother and I experienced postpartum depression. And the gentleman here actually asked me, like, how long does it last? And so I'm like,
I mean, it just depends on the person and if you have the support. For me, I had postpartum anxiety, so it wasn't like, oh, it's gonna go away overnight. It was something that I just had to learn how to deal with the anxiety and be like, okay, hold on, I need to step back, pause, and like just breathe in and take everything. But postpartum depression could last. They always say after 2 years, your baby turns 2 years, you get your pink back because you start feeling like yourself, but not everyone.
Those years, it's so hard to get a good night's sleep.
I know.
That's a big part of it is just to get enough sleep and eat well.
I feel like too, like learning, me being young, I feel like it was hard for me to learn patience. Because you're used to like doing whatever you want, like things are gonna happen your way or no way. And then when you have a baby, it's like, no,
That's right.
it's their way or no
It's
way.
their way or the highway.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a toddler right now and it's his way or the highway. And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, you learn patience. They
Mhm.
test your patience. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
also
an
learned
incredible
to
learning
leave,
experience.
like your work problems and everything. Don't bring that into your child because they're gonna feel it. They know everything. Kids are really smart.
Very incredible observers. Yeah, just astonishing smart. Yeah, other questions for Bianca? Well, thank you so much, Bianca. If everyone who's here could stand up here, I'd love to get your picture holding your certificate. Oh, this goes with it.
Is this everyone, you think? Or no, the morning.
It was me. He stepped in and she stepped in. Yeah.
Get out.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. You want to get in there too?
Yeah, I'll get her.
Okay. Corny.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Nice.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Okay. Oh, first one. Okay, we're first. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. There's some extra programs, anyone wants on. Now, how do we get the, let me, thank you for telling me I will stop recording now. I'm going to hopefully post this with the